No quarter. We want all that you possess. We will be content with nothing less than all that you possess. We want in our hands the reins of power and the destiny of mankind. Here are our hands. They are strong hands. We are going to take your governments, your palaces, and all your purpled ease away from you. And in that day you shall work for your bread, even as the peasant in the field or the starved and runty clerk in your metropolises. Here are our hands. They are strong hands. I was very young and callow, did not know much of anything. And though I had never even heard of a school called individualism, I sang the preen of the strong with all my heart. This was because I was strong myself.
He says, I grew up hungry. I never got enough to eat. There probably was also some kind of spiritual hunger that he felt that took him to libraries from a very early age. In the Oakland Free Public Library, that was important. You didn't have to pay to go inside it. You didn't have to pay to take books out. And it opened this whole big wide world of going in and seeing all kinds of books. There are people who love too much. And if Jack London loved anything too much, it was probably books.
He was working consistently after school, first as a newsboy, and then later, I think it was a cannery was the first factory type job that he did. Mostly it was just this kind of grinding, horrible, noisy work that would fill your head with, the repetitive boom, 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 whatever, the factory noise can just totally wreck your brain. After the 8th grade, he would have been working 10-hour days.
As I listened, my brain began to work. The women of the streets and the man of the gutter drew very close to me. I saw the picture of the social pit as vividly as though it were a concrete thing, and at the bottom of the pit I saw them, myself above them, and I confess a terror seized me. What when my strength failed?
He early on had the sense of himself as being special and knew that he had talent as a writer. He was recognized for talent as a writer.
His mother, Flora, saw a notice in the newspaper that there was a contest, a writing contest, and she urged him to write something and enter it. Stayed up all night, wrote an essay called The Typhoon Off the Coast of Japan. It won. It won first prize. He beat out Cal students, Stanford students, people who were educated.
So early on also, there's an economic incentive for him to write.
I shall climb out of the pit, but not by the muscles of my body shall I climb out. I shall do no more hard work, and may God strike me dead if I do.
He talked about the social pit, or this economic abyss.
The harder he worked, the further down he was falling into poverty. He realized that this was the fate of most people.
He'd run out of money and he'd go to a pawnbroker and leave his typewriter and his coat and get money so he could live. And then when he sold the store, he'd go back. He really felt this sort of danger of losing it and going down.
There's a story about London trying to kill himself as a teenager during this drunken binge, when he becomes so desperate, melancholy, really powerfully depressed about his lot.
He's intoxicated, he's not thinking clearly. Went out to the end of the pier, said his farewells to the world, jumped in the water.
Suicide is not about a desire to die. It's about a desire to live and feeling as though you're trapped in a situation where you can't live.
The water was so cold that it kind of woke him up, and he changed his mind, and he was drowning, but he didn't want to die. He was rescued by a Greek sailor.
It wasn't about him wanting to die. It was about wanting to live in a way in which the oppressions of 19th century industrial capitalism did not impose on his life in the way that he was experiencing it. Now, I do think he wanted to get out of Oakland, and I think he wanted to put some of his past behind him.
I took it into my head to go tramping. I fought my way from the open west to the congested labor centers of the east.
He decides just to leave home, to leave work. He goes out to the train tracks, and a railroad train is coming by, and he jumps on the train and he leaves.
He ended up joining the Army of the Unemployed.
They were marching to Washington, D.C. to demand that the federal government help them. So Jack's initial idea was to go with this group of men.
And he tramped for quite a while before defecting and deciding to take matters into his own hand.
He's always seeking out the poor and the have-nots and the destitute.
He met with some of the socialist intellectual hobos while he was riding the rails. They introduced him to the ideas of Marx and socialism.
So mixed in with adventure, he's exploring those contradictions of American capitalism the entire time.
I had been reborn, but not renamed, and I was running around to find out what manner of thing I was. I ran back to California and opened the books.
He embarked on a program of self-education. He went back to high school. He was, an adult and sitting in classrooms with teenagers at Oakland High School. On the weekends and evenings, he was their janitor.
Also a reporter who came out to hear him speak and wrote about him and described him. So already when he was a teenager, he had notoriety as a kind of fame, and there was a sketch of him as a boy that was published in the Examiner.
Going to the university was viewed as a ticket. He wanted to impress people there. He was a man of ideas.
He ended up taking entrance exams for the university, was accepted.
Thought he knew more than anybody else that was there, including the students and his professors.
He didn't even complete one semester.
My rampant individualism was effectively hammered out of me, and something else as effectively hammered in.
We have this industrial capitalism rearing its ugly head in the United States. And there's a socialist movement here that's extensive.
Socialism is thought of as what Europeans do. It's not an American thing.
I'm not certain when London first read Marx or Engels or any of the other socialist writers, but what's clear is that he read them. And what's clear is that he engaged them seriously.
About the call of the wild and all that, but those wolves, they're in a pack for a reason. The dog can't make it on its own.
What we often remember about London, or he was a writer of adventure stories in the Klondike. But all the while, he's writing these amazing political economic essays about competitive waste and the question of the maximum.
He wanted the world to know that he really took it seriously. The the politics. He really, really believed in this. The brotherhood of man was his guiding hope for the future, and he wanted to bring other people along.
So here he is, late teens, early 20s, standing up on soapboxes throughout the Bay Area and really throughout the United States eventually, giving these speeches.
He spoke on street corners. It was against the law to speak on street corners in Oakland. He was arrested once.
He and Upton Sinclair formed this thing called I think it was called the Intercollegiate Socialist Society. So he went on a lecture tour across the United States, different universities and colleges.
There would be advertisement at various clubs or theaters to see the young boy socialist giving a speech on competitive waste or other subjects that dealt exclusively with the politics of the socialist movement in the United States.
At that time, Jack London converted to violent means to seize state control. That's when he gave his talk, which was called Revolution.
Rulers and ruling classes pause and consider. This is revolution. Yesterday they were not so strong, tomorrow they will be still stronger. They intend nothing less than to take possession of the whole world. If the law of the land permits, they fight for this end peaceably. If the law of the land does not permit, they resort to force. They meet violence with violence. Their hands are strong and they are unafraid. Let me make it concrete. I am a revolutionist.
Some people would say that Jack London was the only revolutionary writer in the United States.
Jack London, from the time he came of age until he died, identified himself with the working class.
The publishers didn't like his political work, but they published it because he was Jack London.
It was more than just wanting to be a socialist, he became one. And that love affair was consummated.